Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. So last time we finished up chapter 32, and we saw the friends go silent. Words had kind of failed them, and Elihu comes into the picture, and he described this internal pressure that had been building in him the whole time while he was waiting to talk. It was like wine sealed in a new wineskin. It was fermenting, it was pressing, and it didn't have anywhere to go. So he committed to no flattery, no partiality. With God as his witness, he was setting the terms of his speeches before he gave them. And now in chapter 33, he actually starts to give them. So everything in chapter 32 was about Elihu. We got his background, his age, why he held back, why he had the right to speak, and what kind of speaker he intended to be. Job's name did not appear one time. But chapter 33 is different. He turns directly to Job, and the first word out of his mouth is Job's name. So let me read through verses 1 through 7. But now, Job, listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. I'm about to open my mouth. My words are on the tip of my tongue. My words come from an upright heart. My lips sincerely speak what I know. The Spirit of God has made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. Answer me then, if you can. Stand up and argue your case before me. I am the same as you in God's sight. I too am a piece of clay. No fear of me should alarm you, nor should my hand be heavy on you. So this is the first time, of course, Elihu has spoken directly to Job. In chapter 29, Job was remembering the days when God watched over him. In chapter 30, he was lamenting what he had lost. And then in chapter 31, we saw that he signed his name to his legal defense and dared God to answer. And that's when Elihu stepped in, when everybody else went quiet. And he spent all of chapter 32 establishing himself. And now, here with the words, but now Job, he crosses over into the actual conversation. So the three friends, they lectured Job. They delivered speeches at him, and they expected him to receive them and then confess this sin that they said he must have had. And when he didn't do that, they repeated themselves. At no point did they invite a genuine reply. Elihu is doing something structurally different, and the direct address at the opening is the first sign of it. He's not speaking about Job, he's speaking to him. And he starts simply enough. Listen to my words. Pay attention to everything I say. That's a reasonable request from someone who's held his peace for 30-some odd chapters. He waited through the entire debate. He gave the older men the floor all the way to the end, and now he's asking for the same thing in return. And then verse 2, he's about to open his mouth. His words are on the tip of his tongue. After all the pressure he's described in chapter 32, the compulsion to speak, the wine ready to burst, this is the release. The moment that he's been building toward has arrived. He doesn't open his case without first saying something about what kind of case it's going to be. My words come from an upright heart, he says in verse 3. My lips sincerely speak what I know. The word translated upright is yosher. It means straight or aligned, without deviation between what a person actually believes and what they say. It appears throughout Proverbs and the Psalms as the word for the kind of person who doesn't bend their speech to fit the audience. Elihu is claiming that his words aren't calculated. They're not shaped to manage the room or to protect relationships. They're coming straight from what he actually knows and believes. So that's the positive side of the commitment that he made at the end of chapter 32. He promised no flattery, no partiality. Here he names what fills the space that those two things would have occupied: sincerity. Alignment between the inside and the outside. What you hear from him is what he actually thinks. Now, this claim is either going to hold up or it's not, but this is the promise that's on the table from the start: an upright heart and straight speech. Now, verse 4 loops back to the argument Elihu made in chapter 32. When he explained why a younger man had the right to speak, the core of the argument was this: wisdom doesn't come from age. It comes from the Spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty. That gives understanding. Age is a credential. The Spirit is the source. So here the same language appears. But the frame is slightly different. He says the Spirit of God has made him, that the breath of the Almighty gives him life. So this isn't just about wisdom, it's about existence. He's a creature of the same God who made Job. Both of them are alive because God breathed into them. The echo of Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 is right there in the background. God breathed into Adam, and Adam became a living being. Elihu is pointing to that same act as the ground of what he is, and by implication of what Job is too. They share the same maker. They share the same breath. That's the setup for what comes next, the equality claim in verse 6. He's building toward it step by step. Answer me if you can. Stand up and argue your case before me. The three friends never said anything like that. It's legal language, and Job would have recognized it immediately. Throughout the book, he had been calling for a hearing. He wanted someone to arbitrate between him and God, someone he could stand before and make his case without being crushed by the weight of the divine presence. In chapter 9, he said there was no one to lay a hand on both of them and bring them together. In chapter 13, he said he would present his case to God's face. In chapter 31, he signed his defense and asked for a written indictment in response. Job wanted a court. He wanted a real hearing with a real exchange. And Elihu is now offering one. He's not God. He can't give Job what Job ultimately wants, but he's offering something the friends never offered, an actual back and forth. Stand up, argue your case. Let's see what you have. The "if you can" carries a little bit of edge to it. He thinks Job's case has problems. He's willing to say so face to face and let Job respond. That's a different posture than anything Job has encountered so far. The friends delivered verdicts. Elihu is opening a forum. I am the same as you in God's sight. I, too, am a piece of clay. The Hebrew behind piece of clay is koratz, which means pinched off from clay, shaped from the earth. The same image appears in Job chapter 10, verse 9, where Job said to God, "Remember that you molded me like clay." Job knows what he is. Elihu is saying he's the same thing. Both of them are pinched from the same material, shaped by the same hands. In the ancient world, this kind of claim was not obvious. Status differences were real and assumed. The older men, the more honored men, the men with established reputations, operated on a different plane from the young and unknown. Elihu had already acknowledged his youth as the reason he held back. Now he's saying that in God's sight, that gap collapses. They're both clay. Neither has standing over the other before the Maker. This also speaks directly to something Job had been afraid of throughout the book. More than once, he had expressed the fear that arguing his case before God would be futile, not just because God was too powerful, but because the sheer presence of God would overwhelm him before he could get the words out. In Job 9:34, he asked that God would remove his rod and not let dread of him terrify him. In Job 13:21, he made the same request almost word for word. Elihu is answering that fear. I am not God. I am clay too. The dread Job feared in a divine encounter doesn't apply here. And then verse 7 makes the application explicit. No fear of me should alarm you. My hand will not be heavy on you. Job had asked God to remove his heavy hand. Elihu is saying he doesn't have one. He's positioning himself as what you could call the interlocutor. It's someone who takes part in a dialogue and conversation and kind of is in the middle. Now, it's not a mediator between Job and God in the ultimate sense, but a human conversation partner who can engage without terrifying. Someone Job can actually speak with and not just speak at. And the offer seems to be a real one. Now, whether Elihu delivers on it, whether he stays as open and non-threatening as he's presenting himself here, that's the question that the rest of his speeches are going to answer. Some commentators have noted that his introduction is a little more self-confident than a man presenting himself as Job's equal might suggest. He came in angry. He had already concluded that both sides were wrong. He's about to tell Job where his case falls short. But the commitment is stated plainly at the start, and that matters. Clay to clay, no terror, no heavy hand. Argue your case if you want to. I'm listening. So next time we're going to be in verses 8 through 12, and Elihu quotes Job's own words back at him and issues his first challenge. In this, you are not right, for God is greater than any mortal. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. God bless.